And now the moment you've been waiting for, our first keynote sponsor. Today is Joe O'Connell. Joe is the founder and artistic director of Creative Machines, one of the largest art and design firms run by a single artist in the country. He grew up as a protege to Thomas Edison's former shop foreman, learning firsthand how to assemble creative teams to move from concept design through fabrication and installation. For over 28 years, Joe has developed an incredible staff of 30 designers, engineers, architects, fabricators, and project managers, all united by a shared vision of creativity, enthusiasm, and respect. Please join me in welcoming Joe to the 10 West stage.
Thank you, Chad. So Chad has told you why I might have something to say, but I'm also going to dwell on failure and some of the challenges that I think affect all of us in creative industries. So this is not just a pep talk for Creative Machines. So I have 120 slides, so don't blink. And then there's still going to be plenty of time for questions at the end. So Creative Machines is a diverse group of about 30 of us, and we're located at Irvington and Alvernon in one of the world's largest facilities for art design and production. And over those 28 years, we've just made hundreds of interactive museum exhibits, rolling ball sculptures, monumental sculptures, and I'll show you some of the new areas we're pushing into. So we're well known for our monumental art, among other categories. We've made some local favorites like Toby. We've made some of the world's largest in a variety of categories. The world's largest acrylic sculpture, kinetic sculptures for NASA, just well-beloved sculptures in various downtown urban cores, and entire building claddings that are interactive and have different personalities day and night. The world's largest freestanding kinetic sculpture, but we will get back to this later in the talk. The world's largest human-powered kinetic sculpture up in Goodyear, Arizona. Many other countries we've done work in. This is one of Japan's first interactive sculptures. You climb into it and then you do a shadow projection on the wall. This is at a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it combines a lot of history and a contemporary approach. We've done hundreds of rolling ball sculptures around the world, and a lot of our work is centered around people. We provide the object in space that gets people talking and interacting with each other. And that's what I've always seen our role to be, is like we make the stuff that makes community glue stick together, because you do need some stuff. You need park benches, you need trees to gather under, and we would argue you need interactive monumental sculptures. We've also, along the way, been inspired by science. We've made the world's largest scientifically accurate model of an erupting volcano. Again, hundreds of ball machines. Let's see just a few seconds of one of these ball machines in action. This is in Salt Lake City, and in the overhead section, we have balls simulating planetary orbits that leave these glowing trails behind them, and then lower down, there's interactive componentry. All right, let's see if we can click to the next. Perfect. And again, some local favorites. So Desert O was probably the world's first sculpture made when LEDs got super powerful. It's about 20 years old. And I just went back and checked everything out. I want to tell you there's a hidden button if you want to pass on to other people. It does different lighting every night of the week. If you face north and face the edge of the donut at knee height, one of the bolts, which looks the same as all the other bolts, controls the color. So now you know what to do in the evening if you're walking in front of the art museum and you see that sculpture. And it's typical of our work that it lasts a long time. I want to spend a few seconds showing a typical recent work. So this is in the city of Atlanta. It's where Martin Luther King Boulevard joins the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's called Bends Towards Justice after the quote most people associate with Martin Luther King Jr. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. This is an interactive piece. It has pressure sensors on both sides of the street. So as people press, they're making the lighting complete the arcs and reach toward each other. So two people do it on opposite sides of the street, and in so doing, they're making the lighting go to the top, and if they push it together and hold it together, there's various Easter eggs in there. And so this is a popular thing for people to do after football games in the stadium, but it's right down the street from where Martin Luther King Jr. preached and where a lot of civil rights activities occurred. So the idea is that you're completing this arc toward justice. And so this is typical of a lot of the work we do. It's monumental, but it also works on a human scale, and it connects to bigger cultural, historical issues. I think this is a great project. We installed it about a year ago, and it achieves a lot of social media posts. And I think it will more as the city publicizes it as games are occurring at the stadium. So we're also doing things, giant climbing structures that are interactive. So like kids are pushing the pistons, they're running the wheels, they're feeding coal into the coal car. We've designed entire bridges. And you might ask, well, why would you do all those things? Is there one thing holding it together? So when I founded Creative Machines, I started with a mission statement. And so the mission is we create objects and environments that encourage creativity, support social interaction, and inspire self-confidence. This was 2 years before the term experience economy was invented, and experience economy is a much better, pithier, succinct way of saying that, but it's what my clumsy 20-some-year-old mind could come up with at the time, which is, I just want to do the stuff I think is really cool and the world needs. And so we never said we're an interactive museum exhibit company, although that's what we did for the first 10 years. We never said we're an art company. And even now, the next things we're designing don't look like traditional artworks. I'll get to some of that in a minute. We're just guided by this mission of making the stuff that brings people together. So we do follow a process. We have to align ourselves with capital projects in the rest of the world, which means there's a concept phase, there's a design phase, there's sometimes prototyping, there's engineering, fabrication, and then installation. And I'll just show some pretty pictures of projects along the way. So let's play a video. This is that project up in Goodyear. This is the world's largest human-powered sculpture. So a lot of what our early work is computer simulation of how is it going to spin, because it's massively chaotic. It's 14,000 pounds of whirling steel overhead, entirely human-powered. So a person who weighs 85 pounds can get all this weight moving overhead just by timing how they pull on the activation cords. So weeks of computer simulation, making a little working model, and then in a second you'll see I bolted it to the top of my car and drove as fast as I could just to get qualitative wind results, and then we fed that back into the computer model. We did a lot of sophisticated FEA analysis to figure out momentum transfer between the axes, et cetera. This is probably about 120 miles per hour wind in our shop. Again, to get qualitative data that then we simulate. This is testing the mirrored system. There's tiny mirrors on the underside of the arms. The art piece is called Chasing the Stars, and those cast tiny stars in the plaza below by reflecting light. And then lots of fabrication, a combination of TIG, MIG, and laser welding, as almost all of our pieces are, using a variety of alloys, and your typical time lapse of something coming together. A lot of people say, hey, we'd love to get involved in one of your builds. And I say, well, it's not like the Golden Graham cereal commercial where everyone drives up in a pickup truck and it all just comes together magically. We're a company that really foregrounds design, planning, and management. But the cool stuff to look at is the actual fabrication and coming together. We love the illusion that order spontaneously emerges and happens when it's really a project manager scratching their head and making everything come together. But this is where the magic happens, is in the shop. So here we are building it. We then do a whole lot of testing, and you'll see we do our first set of testing, which you'll see shortly, is with pneumatic cylinders, simulating like an entire football team pulling on each side. So we've got these pneumatic cylinders that are pulling hundreds of pounds. It gets going much faster than this. And then we bring in a wide range of people to start activating it. I think we were running it slowly so we didn't hit the drone for this footage. It really gets going pretty fast. And this is about 14,000 pounds whirling around. And so now we've got various staff members from small to large to active seniors, and seeing if they can time their pulling so that the whole thing gets whirling around more than just one of the pieces. And then it gets installed, and the best tribute we can get is when we go to check on this sculpture, people say, oh, it's our family ritual. Every day before we leave the rec center, we stop by here. I think we can move to the next slide. Let's see if we can. Okay. So this is just a little overview of some of the tools we use to develop our concepts. Sometimes it's computer modeling of this outdoor solar stellar observatory. Sometimes I'm just coming up with concepts like a giant mastodon sculpture you could spend the night in. A lot of times it's physical prototyping, like ultra deep bass. What if you had really, really deep sounding bass, much bigger than would come out of a speaker through giant gongs? Well, that's something you have to try. You can imagine it, but you have to try it. And then sometimes we get our ideas by working with members of the public. So we'll go out to art classes in schools or community meetings, and we'll give people a lot of materials and have them help build stuff for us. And then a lot of sketching. A lot of times I'll bring a little notebook around and sketch stuff. Then we'll start sketching on a whiteboard, which means a whole group can go up there. Now we use Miro and online tools, but a lot of times we start with sketching, and then we use computer. There's computers can do interesting things even in the sketching world with photos and finding lines of alignment, 3D modeling, even at the concept stage, rapidly iterating how different designs will look. Again, back to the whiteboard. When it's a drawing on your desk, it's yours, and someone feels bad when they're erasing it. When it's on a whiteboard and you're in a group, it's everybody's, and someone can just reach up, and a lot of times, we just erase it with our hands. We don't even use the proper eraser. We just get so excited about collaborating together, and we scratch out stuff that doesn't work, and we write stuff that does work. Lately, I've been doing a lot of 3D models because I've been developing a new type of dichroic material for sun-filled outdoor spaces. And the dichroic material changes the color of light depending on the angle. It's really hard to simulate that in the computer. And I really want to do something for one of the next Olympics. So if you'll play this for a second, this is a scale model of this concept with 5 rotating rings that cast multicolored shadows on the ground, and they occasionally line up to the Olympic logo. It's both human-powered and wind-powered. So a lot of times you can only come up with these ideas if you're building 3D models and experimenting. And I'll get in a minute to how far ahead of the curve do you want to be? And that's a trick question. The answer is you want to be 1 step ahead of the market. Not 0 steps, not 2 steps. You want to have the idea peaking right when interest peaks. So we're talking to various groups about possibly doing sculptures in the Olympic villages for some of the upcoming Olympics. A lot of times we'll build a demonstration kinetic model to show to a client, and you can get some things with lighting and action that you can't get, although simulation is getting so much better. 3D modeling in Rhino, SolidWorks, and various other tools, FEA analysis of forces and stresses. These are just the tools you would find in a typical engineering shop. FEA analysis over time to look for certain peak values. Not every computer analysis thing has pretty colored pictures as its end result. Sometimes you have to pore through numbers and write scripts that analyze those. And when something is behaving chaotically, you typically have to perturb it in a variety of ways to find the full envelope of how it's going to behave. And so we'll simulate weeks and weeks of data driven by wind and human interaction, gather the data, and then run computational analysis of that data. We can highlight specific areas of stress and thicken welds. Ultimately, our work ends up as a drawing package that's stamped by an engineer. You can see every bolt is detailed often. And then Oops. And then that package of information, it's almost like in the same company we become a construction firm. So we're machining, we're bolting, we're assessing quality, we're CNC and manually machining parts, we're doing a lot of welding. Oops. Working in a variety of alloys. Water jetting parts. Like a small factory, but we only make one custom thing at a time. And we have lots of space to do large things and move them around. And then large cranes to rehearse installation. And then we become like a general contractor installing. So we have all of the equipment certifications that you would typically use on a job site for installing large things with cranes, forklifts, etc. We have hard hats with everyone's name. Everyone has their favorite vest, all that stuff. And so we've spent many late nights on construction sites installing our work. I used wings over water. This is one of our sculptures, because later I'm going to tell you what went wrong with this. And I don't want this to be talk about success, because I know hidden in at least 10 of your hearts out there is doubt and worry about your own creative enterprise. And I have failed as a keynote speaker if I don't offer you some lesson that you can learn from. So yeah, if you'll play the video in the lower left corner, Wings Over Water is the world's largest freestanding kinetic sculpture. Or it was, but it is no longer kinetic. Due to damage in the ice storm or people getting into it during COVID, parts broke, and the city just doesn't have the budget to repair it. It's a very short video. So I was on a guest on Freakonomics last week on their failure series, and my segment about exactly what happened. And sometimes failure is your own failure. Sometimes failure is because you're embedded in a larger system. And I would say one of the key lessons about failure is if you can have someone else fail and watch it, that's the best kind of failure, because then you can learn from it. And when we were singular-celled organisms, a threat, you could only detect a threat when you were right up against it. And it was usually a chemical threat or ultraviolet or whatever. Trillions of single-celled organisms died because they couldn't see it. The minute we could start seeing and hearing, we could see a failure and a threat from a distance, and no longer was it, and then we could learn those lessons. The second kind of failure is a failure that hurts you enough that the bone grows back stronger, but it doesn't cripple you. And so that's what our Wings Over Water failure was. We got a lot better about ongoing maintenance contracts, a lot better at testing, a lot better at pushing back against budgets and timelines that weren't realistic, and a lot better at our own internal practices. So it was the second best kind of failure. This starts a portion of my presentation where I want to talk about some of the issues affecting creative firms. It's no secret that, or it's not talked about enough how many successful firms are actually partnerships and collaborations. If you think of a lot of the top tech firms, a lot of them started as partnerships, even if one person then takes most of the limelight. And in our own company, we often say that Joe is the yes person with clients. Chrissy, our vice president, is the no person. And where we meet in the middle with maybe is exactly where we need to be as a company, or yes with caveats. And so collaboration and partnership is a really valuable resource, but there's different types. So when we did the zoo sign for the Reed Park Zoo, one of my collaborators was Jim Stone, and Jim loves to draw animals, but he does not really think about large-scale interactivity. He doesn't think about seating. He doesn't think about the idea of representing the animal kingdom with their eyes all looking out so that we are part of it. But he was the perfect collaborator for this, and we paid him well for his work, and we honored him on the plaque. So I love collaborating with somebody who brings a different thing to the table. Another collaboration I really enjoyed was with Ashwaq Abdullah, who is an Emirati artist, working mostly in Abu Dhabi. So I took some images from her Instagram. She's mostly a two-dimensional artist, but she does really interesting interactions with the 3D world. So she does these paintings in coffee, where she'll take a photo, and there's like the coffee cup has spilled, and then the coffee trails up from the coffee cup and becomes the face of the founder of the UAE. And then she's very interested in how the wind blows the sand across the surface. So she's a 2D artist trying to work or thinking 3D, and I'm mostly a 3D artist. So we worked on this crescent for the Four Seasons. And so it combines our idea of lighting, so you can put different countries' flags on it. And it's like, these aren't great photos, but it's like the wind has blown across the surface, leaving this calligraphic poem that she wrote. So that was a wonderful collaboration, because neither of us was stepping on each other's toes, and we together made something that worked out best for us. Here's a project where I'm still looking for the right collaborator. This is a project called I Contain Multitudes. That is a sculpture that carves new permanent monuments to replace the monuments in America that either tell a false story or don't tell the true story of our nation and who we should be honoring. So it carves it in limestone. You can see the lips and the nose just starting to appear out of this crude prototype. And so for a while, I was collaborating with a great friend of mine who's a figurative artist, Alex Haveri, and we were working on what form that would take. But then I realized it would be better if I was not the person sculpting the face. And I have met two local Native American artists who are thinking in very provocative ways about how to monumentalize not so much the past, but the future, where their culture is going, to offer us all interesting possibilities. So this is a page from a proposal we recently submitted. So finding a collaborator who does something different than you, that together you can make something that neither of you could make, that's the key. I'm collaborating with Annalise Bruner, who is a descendant of a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So we do these things with lights and projections that can fill a space. The space where the Tulsa Race Massacre happened has a whole lot of homemade unofficial murals, and it has a lot of Black Lives Matter insignia. So there's no way we want to cover that, because that's part of history. But we can project new images on top of it that don't erase the old images. And we make things that tell stories through tiny laser cuts. So the concept I worked up with Annalise is these hanging teardrops that memorialize the graves that are still unrecognized after the massacre, and present an image as seen through a child's eyes of the night of the massacre, with the stars looking on, with some ambiguity between the flames and the smoke, and just between clouds. This is our first draft. Actually, this is my first draft. She's mostly a words person. She's a great speaker and a writer, and I'm more of an artist. But I would not have had the idea of seeing it through the eyes of a child had I not worked with her. So we're able to produce something that neither of us would have thought of individually, and I think that's just great, and we'll both be honored and paid for our work. When I collaborate, we don't do anything extractive. Everybody is honored for what they do. For a while, I collaborated with another artist, Blessing Hancock. We did Bike Church, which you may be familiar with. We did several other pieces. And for a while, we would finish each other's sentences, and we worked together great, making ideas that we would not have otherwise. What I think happened in the end is we were just too similar, and we started to drift apart. The analogy I'd like to use is, think of the asteroid belt. Picture two asteroids moving through space next to each other. They think they have some bond and they're always going to be there. In fact, each of them is being pulled by the sun, and they're in a slightly different orbit. In 271 years, they're going to end up on the opposite sides of the sun, because they were not really bound to each other. And so the best partnerships for me, has always been an asteroid that's on the other side of the asteroid belt, because we cover more area that way. Anyway, it has a happy ending. You just have to recognize when you're drifting apart. Or select someone who's already a different asteroid on the other side of the belt, because they're all moved by the sun, not by the gravitational field of each other. Another collaboration, sometimes we just work with a big group that has an idea. I would not have picked this color palette. We did this for Google's headquarters in Boston. When you walk into a particular location, it spells out joy. And the hearts line up. So people have gotten married in the hearts. People climb all over the joy. There's animated lighting. I would not have picked those colors, but it was a collaboration with an entire graphic treatment and an identity and branding for the whole site. So we painted it their colors. Some collaborations are people tell you what to do and they write you a check. And there's nothing wrong with that. A few other things. When I was starting out my business, in a business where you don't have tremendous access to capital, cash flow is the most important thing. I was so amazed that most small to mid-level business accounting software doesn't do cash flow forecasting, because that's the most important thing. These are cash flow forecasts that we do for the next year and a half at different points in our business history. Upper left corner, uh-oh. You can see it's dropping below 0. Lower than that, oh my goodness, we've got this great increase. But then projects get delayed, and that spreads the peak out. You always have this trough you always have this downslope at the end, and that's what is your runway. That's how many projects you have lined up to do before all of your fixed and variable expenses kick in. I'm just amazed that you can't just do this with QuickBooks, but we had to develop our own system to do cash flow forecasting. Here, let's play this video briefly. So one of the other things I learned is, like I said, in my business, I'm the yes person. And a lot of times when you're starting out your business, you have to say yes to every opportunity, because that's how you grow your business. But at some point, you have to make the switch to saying no to the things you don't want to do. And so we have this rule at Creative Machines to decide if we want to take the job. Does it build on what we've done? Does it point to where we want to go? Will it make money? And if it does 3 of those things, it's great. If it does 2 of those things, we'll definitely consider it. But if it does only 1, then we have to say no. And so I just use the image of the wet wheel, because I only want to do projects that are fun and really cool. I was in a meeting last year, and I'm probably guilty, as many founders, of sometimes just saying something and then saying, oh, did I say that out loud? And it was like a boring project. And I'm like, I'm going to be dead in 30 years. I don't want to do dumb projects. And I was like, oops, did I say that out loud? And you should all have those moments, because your years, it may not be 30, it may be 40, maybe 50, but life is short, and everything changes. So only do the projects that compel you. I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't take a project that's okay and pays the bills really well, because that's needed as well. Michelangelo, on his way home from painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, would stop at a rich nobleman's house and quickly do a fresco over the mantelpiece just to eat. And if Michelangelo had to do that, well, we can paint a few mantelpieces, I sometimes say. But we don't want to do what we've stopped doing, are big trade show things that just go in a landfill, or something that we really don't, like if it's just a dumb idea and we know it's not going to work, we will try to steer the client in a better direction. You want to stay one step ahead of the market. So during COVID, I started thinking, outdoor education is going to become really big. I just started getting interested in doing things outdoors. So we started planning these sculptural teaching moments in outdoor spaces. And lo and behold, now we have 2 or 3 big jobs where we're doing that. So you want to start thinking about things before the market. You do not want to have invented the computer mouse in like 1947. That's 2 steps in front of the market. You want to be just one or maybe that's what Xerox was. They invented the mouse. They didn't really know what to do with it until Steve Jobs stole it for Apple. You just have to be 1 step ahead, not 2, not 0. A lot of times people come to our facility and they're amazed at just how orderly things are. They said, oh, I thought creative work would be different. Like, our fasteners are alphabetized and properly sorted and labels. There's marks on the floor for where pallets can go and where the forklift can go. Our project management software is looking ahead 2 years and exploring different scenarios. In the lower left, every piece we make in CNC machine goes into a parts lifecycle management system. So there's no files that say final, or version 7, really final, or whatever. No, there's a PLM system that handles it. And that's because creativity is so chaotic as it is. You need to rein in as much of that as possible. Like, why should you have to be creative just to get the right size bolt? So I do think it's necessary to have as much order as you can in order to grapple with the really important issues. One of the things I started talking about with other creatives is the curse of imagination, the same thing that lets us come up with new ideas also sometimes makes creative people susceptible to self-delusion, to imagining problems that aren't there, to spinning around in circles. And I think there's a fun way to look at that. So I put together this flow chart of the human condition just a few weeks ago. It's posted on my website, josepho'connell.art, and it has humorous things like, is your problem the subject of more than 2 plays by Shakespeare or Sophocles? Oh, a comedy or tragedy? And it has more serious advice. But I try to diagram, okay, how have I gotten myself out of the various loops and obsessions that afflict a creative person? Because I realized I wasn't going to kill the same gift that makes you come up with ideas that unlock things for other people's lives can also lead you astray. And I'd be surprised if there weren't at least 5 of you in the room that find yourselves maybe the victim of your own imagination. Anyway, if you're curious about that, it's on my website. Here I want to segue into an exciting new project. So over the years, we've made a bunch of art and museum projects. We built about half the exhibits for Austin's Thinkery. We built all the exhibits for Moxie in Santa Barbara. These are 2 of the most successful children's museums. But something always bothered me. Whenever museum designers get together and talk about a new project, there's 2 projects that they name check, one of them being the City Museum in St. Louis, Missouri, and the other is the Exploratorium. Both of those institutions grew organically. They weren't designed. And those are 2 of the best. So it made me realize there's something inherent in the process of designing on paper and computer and then making it all rush to opening day. And of course, that's what you have to do for capital projects of the type that have financed our company. But that may not be the best way to do really creative new work. At the same time, we've been hosting open houses at Creative Machines where people come and play in a more free and unstructured way with the materials that we have around. And people just keep saying, oh, could you do this more often? This is just so wonderful. This is the best field trip our class has ever done. We want to just keep coming here. And so we've been doing that for probably close to 8 years now. And people have been enjoying it. And so that gave me the idea. This is a recent event we did where we made a ball machine that's completely open. You can interact with it in ways that we've designed and ways we haven't designed. You can go grab like a table decoration and put it in there. And people loved it. At the same time, there's been this movement, academic, intellectual, and from a business point of view, of adventure play, which is fewer rules, richer materials, less adult structure, but more permission and more properly creating the environment for kids to take risks. Building things bigger than themselves, small cuts and bruises, but no serious injuries. It's especially good for girls to be the natural scientists that they are because it gets away from so much social convention. It's just people, tools, nature, and each other. That kid in the lower right corner who's doing a homemade zip line, as a parent you might say, oh my goodness, that looks dangerous. But he's only 1 or 2 feet above the ground. And so there's a feeling of risk, but there's not serious hazard. The homemade slides above it are similar. There's only so much hurt you're going to get into when you're there. And I watched a girl walking across a walkway made out of tires, and each one was wobbly, and she'd test each one. And then she'd go, she made rules, she figured out, okay, if I stack them more evenly, they're going to be... And when she made it to the stack of tires that was 3 high, she was just so thrilled. So she had taken risk. Risk is a psychological category. Hazard is an objective category. So if there were wires sticking out of the tire or hidden chemicals or whatever, that would be a problem. But she did the risk and achieved the benefits. Anyway, there's a whole literature on why adventure play is safer. So I've been reading this. I've been watching kids coming to Creative Machines. And then I realized the problem with adventure playgrounds is they're so grubby and they don't serve food or beer. And so I went to visit Junkyard Social Club, and the place was packed because an adult could come there, and in the morning they could have a cappuccino and Wi-Fi while their kids are playing, taking risks, and then they could have a beer after work, and the kids are still there. And I was like, here's a business model. And then I heard that lack of community is America's biggest problem. And I said, since when is that not a great business opportunity? So I also realized that you could have events in a really amazing space like this. If you jazzed it up, most adventure playgrounds are just too muddy. So we came up with, I'm just going to skip. This is a calendar for how you could fill a new type of community center every day of the week with like micro school support in the morning, college student raves in the evenings. You'd fill the weekends, you'd do corporate events and weddings, and it sounds hard to believe, but every European city square does that. And that's actually the type of environment we typically make. We're in a little bit of an unusual environment where we're taking our cars individually from one place to the next to the next. And I'd like to make one place where people can do a whole lot of amazing things. So that needs an unusual, inspired design. So we came up with a design. We have some unused space at Creative Machines. It's about 2 acres of space, and we came up with this design that would be partial geodesic domes filled with colored light filtering material and a lot of plants, container plants and vines, using about 3 acres of runoff, so we minimize how much water we have to do. And we're using the plant matter as a thin skin for shade and enjoyment. So I came up with this idea just working by myself, and then lo and behold, actually I'll come back to this in a second. We're in an area of high neighborhood vulnerability. I've also learned, actually let's go to why we wanted to do this where Creative Machines is located. So this is a map on socialcapital.org. This is the website that disseminates the research done by Raj Chetty and his colleagues at Harvard into economic and social mobility in America. So this is an economic and social mobility map. Brown is bad. And you can see it's certain rural areas, it's the Deep South, and it's certain urban counties. And where we are in the lower right, is also not very good for a number of reasons. But their solution is that economic and social mobility are permanently changed when people meet and interact with people outside their own social class. So let's pause for a second. We were talking about monumental art a few minutes ago, and now we're talking about social science research. But if you go back to the mission statement was making the stuff that solves social problems. That's all we've ever really wanted to do. That's where the art comes from. That's where the interactive exhibits come from. So we think we're in a great location at Creative Machines. We've founded a not-for-profit. We are joined by a fantastic board, which includes Liz, which maybe you all know as a result of this festival. Liz is on our board. And the website is secondsky.org. And we are fundraising to build this new type of community center. All the social science research and the frequently asked questions, they're all on the website if you're interested. And that's where I will conclude the formal part of the talk and open it up for questions. I put up some sample questions in case anyone wants to, and I'm not sure how much time we have. I saw you first. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Where do you want?
Oh, let's just do both.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Janice Siegel-Stormont from Sustainable Tucson, and you might have noticed that we have a recycling program in Tucson that Steve Kovacek, our city council members, and so they have the bifusion blocks. I was wondering if you're making use of those or you will be in the future.
We have designed the bifusion blocks into an expansion of the Children's Museum that we designed. That's not a project I showed, but we've included those in that project. Yes, in the white shirt.
How have you guys been implementing AI in your creative process or in how you're building these structures? Is it at all a part of your process now?
It definitely is. This might be a great one to sort of close on if we're out of time. So AI is great at doing B- work, which is a good thing because art creation is a combination of A+ work and some B- coloring in between the lines. So I use a lot of those dome images are AI images. I can do watercolor painting. It would take me all day to do one of those paintings. And by directing prompts, I think AI is really good at fleshing out a direction you've already decided to go. When I try to get AI to do new types of interactive kinetic sculpture, it completely can't do that because there's no examples to follow. But if I wanted to do a face of a human, it can do that really well. And then even great art includes some B- work. If you go to the Academy in Florence where Michelangelo worked, you can see some of his work where some of the proportions aren't quite right. The Mannerists that followed Michelangelo actually got a lot of the technical stuff righter than him. He's a much greater artist because he captured the perfect timing, and he picked the right poses, and he figured out how it would work in the round. But there are people who would sculpt a lip better, would sculpt a shoulder better, and there's technical flaws. So even great art includes some B- work, and AI can do that, can fill in those gaps.
Ooh. Joe, thank you for showing us that we can do something cool and really what the world needs, and more importantly, what we need here in Southern Arizona. Everyone, please join me again in thanking Joe O'Connell.